Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a quiet riverbank, the soft murmur of water brushing against weathered wood beneath your feet. The evening sky stretches above you, painted in muted shades of indigo and silver, with a few distant stars beginning to shimmer through the gentle haze. A delicate breeze stirs the leaves along the bank, and the scent of damp earth rises softly into the air. You feel the calm of the surroundings settling into your shoulders, a slow exhale of your day's tension, as if the river itself encourages you to pause, to listen, to become aware of the subtle rhythms of the night. Tonight, the Pascagoula River holds a story of quiet wonder, of ordinary lives touched by something extraordinary, a story that invites both curiosity and gentle reflection. It was a place and a time when life moved with a slower, almost meditative rhythm. The year was 1973, a period marked by both uncertainty and imagination in the United States. Beyond the calm of the riverbanks, the nation was navigating the complexities of post-Vietnam America, grappling with cultural shifts, political tensions, and the lingering hum of Cold War anxieties. Yet, in this small corner of Mississippi, the world felt suspended in a softer, slower cadence. The river mirrored the sky in shades of silver and deep blue, quietly carrying stories from the past while hinting at mysteries that might lie just beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. There was a comfort in this rhythm, a gentle reassurance that even in a world of rapid change, moments of stillness could exist, inviting contemplation and awareness. Stories have a way of settling into our minds differently at night, especially when they are both true and mysterious. They awaken a gentle curiosity that coexists with calm, an awareness that the world contains layers we might not fully understand. The tale that unfolded along the Pascagoula River was not one born from imagination alone, but from the experiences of two ordinary men whose lives would intersect with something unexplainable. This is a story that asks not for fear, but for attentive observation, not for disbelief, but for an openness to the unknown. It is a story to be carried softly, like the river's own current, guiding your mind along a path where the ordinary meets the extraordinary in quiet harmony. Consider, for a moment, the sense of isolation that can exist along a river at night. Even in a small town where neighbors are familiar faces and community ties run deep, the stretch of water can feel private, secret, and removed from the broader world. Sounds are amplified. The gentle splash of a fish breaking the surface, the soft rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind against the water. In such moments, the mind becomes attuned to details that might otherwise go unnoticed, noticing shifts in light, color, and movement. This heightened awareness is exactly what makes stories like tonight's so compelling. They remind us that even in places we think we know, there may be glimpses of something beyond the ordinary, glimpses that quietly alter the way we perceive the world. It is important, too, to approach this story with a calm and open mind. The events along the Pascagoula River in 1973 are not told here to startle or alarm, but to invite you into a space of gentle exploration. The world is full of mysteries, and some are so subtle that they slip past our everyday attention. In the stillness of night, when the river reflects the sky like a mirror and the mind drifts between wakefulness and dreams, these mysteries can be sensed more deeply, not as threats, but as gentle nudges toward wonder. Tonight, you are invited to witness a story that sits at the intersection of reality and mystery, a story that reminds us that ordinary lives can sometimes brush against the extraordinary without warning, leaving echoes that linger long after the moment has passed. So, as you settle into a state of calm, imagine the river's gentle flow beneath a silvered sky, carrying with it a quiet invitation to curiosity. Let your mind drift slowly along the banks, aware of the hush of the evening, the soft stirrings of nocturnal life, and the unspoken anticipation that arises when something remarkable is about to unfold. The Pascagoula River, in all its serene beauty, is the beginning of our journey, a place where ordinary humans, guided by routine and simple purpose, encountered a mystery that would ripple through time, memory, and imagination. Allow yourself to breathe deeply, to let the night enfold you, and to prepare for a story where calm meets wonder, where relaxation meets curiosity, and where the gentle current of the river becomes a companion in the unfolding tale. The town of Pascagoula, Mississippi, in the early 1970s was a place defined by its quiet rhythms and the gentle pulse of the river that gave it life. Nestled along the Gulf Coast, the community thrived in a delicate balance between industry and the natural world. Shipyards hummed with the steady labor of skilled workers, crafting vessels that would journey across distant waters, while the surrounding swamplands and riverbanks remained largely untouched, preserving a timeless serenity. Evenings carried the soft sounds of a town winding down, the distant clang of metal from the shipyards, the faint murmur of traffic along narrow streets, and the natural chorus of frogs and insects echoing from the marshes. It was a setting that encouraged reflection, where the ordinary became beautiful in its stillness, and where the night held a quiet space for imagination to linger. In such a town, life was familiar and predictable. Neighbors knew one another by name, and the routines of daily life were reassuringly steady. Fishermen would launch their boats in the early morning, schoolchildren would play along shaded streets, and families would gather for quiet dinners as the sun sank behind the river horizon. Yet, beneath this sense of ordinary calm, there was an undercurrent of curiosity about the unknown. In the 1970s, America was experiencing a surge of interest in UFOs, extraterrestrial life, and unexplained phenomena. Television programs and newspapers frequently reported sightings, often blending genuine investigation with sensationalized accounts, while local legends of strange lights and mysterious creatures were passed quietly between neighbors, gaining a peculiar weight in the context of small-town life. Pascagoula, with its secluded riverbanks and wide open skies, was a place where the imagination could stretch freely, and where unusual events might feel both plausible and extraordinary. The Pascagoula River itself was more than just a body of water. It was a character in its own right within the town's fabric. Flowing gently but persistently, it reflected both the moonlight and the community's shared history. Its banks were lined with moss-draped trees, reeds swaying softly in the breeze, and occasional patches of fog that would rise in the cool night air. The river provided sustenance, recreation, and moments of quiet reflection for those who ventured along its edge. Many in Pascagoula had grown up listening to tales of mysterious happenings along the water, glimpses of unexplained lights, strange sounds drifting across the surface, and fleeting shadows that vanished as quickly as they appeared. These stories, though often told in whispers, contributed to a collective awareness that the river might conceal more than it revealed, that ordinary nights sometimes held extraordinary possibilities. In the context of 1973, the world beyond Pascagoula was equally intriguing. The Cold War had instilled both anxiety and fascination with the unknown, while scientific discoveries and space exploration captured the public imagination. Americans were simultaneously grounded by daily routines and inspired by the vastness of possibilities beyond their immediate perception. This duality, between the familiar and the unknown, the tangible and the mysterious, resonated deeply in small towns like Pascagoula. Here, ordinary citizens could encounter experiences that challenged their understanding of reality, yet the setting itself encouraged calm observation rather than panic. It is within this environment that the story of two men quietly fishing on a mild October evening begins to unfold, a moment where the ordinary rhythms of the river intersect with something entirely unexpected. The culture of the town also played a subtle role in shaping perception. People in Pascagoula valued practicality, hard work, and a grounded sense of reality. They were skeptical by nature but not dismissive, open to noticing things that didn't fit neatly into explanation. When unusual occurrences were reported, the community often approached them with a balance of curiosity and caution, willing to consider possibilities without jumping to extreme conclusions. Local newspapers would occasionally highlight odd sightings, but these stories were framed with restraint, reflecting the town's steady temperament. This calm, considered approach is important to remember as the events of the Pascagoula River unfold, because it colors how the eyewitnesses' experiences were received, not with hysteria, but with measured attention and interest. Even the landscape contributed to the story's subtle tension and immersive quality. Thick underbrush, winding river bends, and reflective water surfaces created a natural stage where light and shadow played in unexpected ways. The isolation of certain fishing spots, coupled with the quiet of the night, heightened sensory awareness. Sounds carried farther, movements appeared more pronounced, and the mind became attuned to subtleties it might otherwise overlook. In this way, Pascagoula itself was an accomplice in the story, a setting that allowed perception to expand, that invited awareness of the unusual without forcing alarm. As the evening deepened and the sun dipped below the horizon, the river and town slipped into their nighttime rhythm. The air grew cooler, the sky darker, and the world around the river seemed to pause, holding its breath in quiet anticipation. It is in this moment, with the calm of the town and the gentle flow of the river as witnesses, that the story begins. Two men, guided by routine and the promise of a peaceful evening on the water, would encounter something that defied explanation, a moment where the ordinary landscape of Pascagoula became a doorway into the extraordinary. As you imagine yourself along the riverbank, feeling the hush of the night and the soft stirrings of life around you, you are stepping into the very setting where this gentle mystery quietly begins to unfold. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were ordinary men living ordinary lives in the small town of Pascagoula, yet on a quiet October evening in 1973, their routines would intersect with something extraordinary. Charles Hickson, a man in his mid-40s, carried the quiet dignity of someone who had spent much of his life working with his hands. He had a sturdy presence, a calm demeanor, and a mind attuned to the practicalities of daily life. Hickson had worked in shipyards, familiar with the smells of metal, the rhythm of machinery, and the discipline of a task completed well. Yet beneath this grounded exterior was a natural curiosity about the world, a willingness to notice details that others might overlook. He was the type of man who appreciated a quiet evening by the river, the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore, and the subtle movement of a fish beneath the surface. Calvin Parker, a younger man in his early 20s, was quieter, with a reflective and almost poetic sensibility. He worked nearby and often joined friends for fishing trips along the Pascagoula River. Parker's youth brought a sense of openness and attentiveness to the natural world, a sensitivity that complemented Hickson's practical steadiness. Together, the two men formed an unassuming duo, the kind of companionship born from shared routines and mutual respect. That evening, like many others, they had ventured to the river to fish, to enjoy the slow passing of hours, and to embrace the calm that the water and surrounding woods naturally offered. There was nothing unusual in their outing, nothing to suggest that this ordinary evening would become a story remembered for decades. The night began as many nights on the river did. The air was mild, carrying the faint scent of the marsh and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. The surface of the water reflected the waning light of the sun, now a soft amber glow fading into twilight. The river moved gently, with subtle eddies and ripples that caught the light in fleeting patterns. Fishing rods rested quietly, lines suspended in the water, as Hickson and Parker spoke softly, their conversation meandering from the mundane to the reflective. The river, the trees, and the fading day created a cocoon of calm, a place where awareness sharpened naturally, each sound and movement gaining gentle prominence. It was during this calm, almost meditative state that the first unusual sensation appeared. Hickson and Parker both noticed an unfamiliar light on the opposite bank, a glimmer that did not resemble the reflection of the fading sun or any ordinary man-made source. Their attention was drawn first with curiosity, then with a quiet, mounting sense of intrigue. The light moved in a way that defied simple explanation, hovering and shifting, as though it possessed a will of its own. At first, both men assumed it might be someone else fishing, or perhaps a boat moving along the distant water. But the light's behavior soon proved inconsistent with any human activity, prompting an awareness that something unusual was unfolding before them. As the light drew closer, the shape of an entity became perceptible. Hickson described seeing a creature unlike anything he had ever encountered, with a form that suggested both mechanical and organic qualities. Parker, initially uncertain, soon shared the sense that the object or being before them was alive, yet not hostile. The calm of the river juxtaposed against the uncanny presence of the unknown created a tension that was more curious than frightening. Their instincts were engaged, not in panic, but in heightened observation, cataloging each detail with a clarity born of the stillness around them. Hickson's natural steadiness and Parker's attentive perception allowed both men to remain remarkably composed, even as the encounter deepened. Psychologists who have studied eyewitness accounts of unusual phenomena note that ordinary individuals often experience a heightened sense of focus during unexpected events. Hickson and Parker were no exception. Every subtle movement of the entity, every change in light or texture, was observed with an intensity that ordinary days rarely required. Yet despite the extraordinary nature of the experience, there was a surprising gentleness to it. The beings did not act with aggression or violence. Rather, there was a calm curiosity in their presence. The river, the night, and the subtle rustling of reeds provided a backdrop that encouraged attentive perception, allowing Hickson and Parker to retain coherent memories of the event, a factor that would later lend weight to their testimony. The broader historical context also colors our understanding of the witnesses' perspective. In 1973, the United States was in the midst of a cultural fascination with UFOs and unexplained phenomena. Films, television shows, and news articles regularly depicted strange lights in the sky, mysterious spacecraft, and abductions. Hickson and Parker were not immune to these cultural influences, yet their descriptions were grounded in the reality of the river, the textures of their environment, and the tangible sensations they experienced. Their ordinary lives, coupled with their clear, detailed observations, positioned them uniquely. They were credible witnesses who described something extraordinary without embellishment, guided by genuine perception and careful attention. As the men observed the entity, subtle physiological responses naturally occurred, heartbeats quickened, adrenaline rose, yet their calm and reflective nature prevented panic from overwhelming them. Hickson later recalled a sense of being gently lifted from the ordinary flow of the evening, a feeling of suspended reality in which time seemed to slow and details became magnified. Parker, younger and less experienced, described the sensations with a mix of awe and disbelief, noting the surreal quality of seeing something so completely outside everyday experience. Together, they navigated a liminal space where ordinary perception intersected with something truly mysterious, each moment carefully recorded in memory as though the river itself had slowed to accommodate their awareness. This section of the story emphasizes not only the identity and character of the eyewitnesses but also the calm, observational mindset that allowed them to engage with the extraordinary in a measured, detailed way. Their ordinary backgrounds, combined with attentive perception and the serene setting of the Pascagoula River, created a foundation for the encounter that was as believable as it was mysterious. This careful, grounded perspective sets the stage for the abduction itself, a moment that would forever alter their lives and contribute a story of wonder, curiosity, and quiet intrigue to the cultural history of UFO phenomena. As the night deepened and the river's surface glimmered under the emerging stars, Hickson and Parker's lives were on the threshold of an experience that would ripple far beyond the ordinary rhythms of small-town Mississippi. In the calm, immersive environment of the river, the ordinary met the extraordinary, and two men would find themselves witnesses to a mystery that remains both gentle and deeply compelling. The moment of the encounter arrived with a quiet inevitability, as though the river itself had guided Hickson and Parker into a space where the ordinary and the extraordinary could meet. At first, the strange lights on the opposite bank seemed distant, almost dreamlike, reflecting softly on the water as the men adjusted their eyes to the twilight. Then, gradually, the shapes began to emerge, shifting from vague luminescence into a form both mechanical and organic, entirely unlike anything they had ever seen. Hickson later described the beings as having a pear-shaped body, about 5 feet tall, with a smooth, metallic surface that reflected the river's subtle light. Their arms, ending in claw-like appendages, moved with deliberate, almost hypnotic precision, while their voices, though minimal, seemed to hum softly, vibrating through the quiet night air. Parker's perception of the creatures was equally vivid. He recalled the sensation of being watched without hostility, a gaze that was curious rather than threatening. The beings' movements were slow, deliberate, and strangely gentle, almost as if they were studying the men without imposing force. This gentleness distinguished the Pascagoula encounter from many other reports of abduction phenomena. There was no aggression, no immediate threat, only an unearthly presence that commanded attention. Psychologists have noted that abduction narratives often include heightened sensory awareness, and in this case, every subtle movement, reflection, and sound was perceived in sharp, unforgettable detail. Hickson and Parker's ability to maintain composure amid the surreal events is remarkable, their ordinary grounding allowing them to observe with clarity while the night unfolded around them. The physical sensations of the encounter were subtle yet profound. Hickson described a feeling of weightlessness, as though the river itself had receded from beneath him and the world had suspended its normal rhythm. Parker, meanwhile, felt a strange, magnetic pull, an almost gentle tug that lifted his perception beyond the familiar boundaries of space and time. Both men experienced a sense of awe, a deep, unspoken recognition that they were encountering something beyond human understanding. Researchers studying abduction phenomena often highlight this mixture of wonder and fear, noting that the absence of overt hostility can make the experience more vivid in memory, allowing witnesses to recall minute details with remarkable consistency. In the case of Pascagoula, this consistency would become a cornerstone of the story's credibility. The environment itself played a subtle role in shaping the experience. The river, the fog rising from its surface, and the moonlight filtering through clouds created a surreal stage where light and shadow shifted with every movement. Hickson later recalled seeing the creatures reflected in the water, their forms doubled and distorted by the gentle ripples, adding an almost painterly quality to the scene. Parker noticed the smell of the night, earthy, wet, and tinged with a strange metallic scent that he could not identify. Every sound, the soft splash of water, the hum of unseen insects, the whisper of the wind, became amplified in the heightened awareness that accompanies extraordinary events. These environmental cues anchored the experience in reality, providing a sensory richness that made the encounter deeply immersive and, paradoxically, grounded. Historical context enriches our understanding of the encounter. Abduction phenomena were already entering public consciousness in the early 1970s, following reports from other parts of the United States, including cases like Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. Researchers studying these events observed recurring patterns. Beings described with similar physical traits, sensations of paralysis or weightlessness, and gentle or investigative behaviors rather than overt aggression. Hickson and Parker's account fit many of these patterns, yet it remained unique in its distinctly calm and nonviolent tone. Scholars argue that such cases illustrate the interplay between cultural expectations, psychological perception, and genuine anomalous experience, demonstrating how ordinary individuals can encounter events that challenge conventional understanding without experiencing terror. Eyewitness testimony from Pascagoula highlights this interplay between perception and reality. Hickson's description focused on precise details: the creature's movements, the texture of their skin, the mechanical quality of their limbs, and the rhythmic, almost deliberate hum they emitted. Parker emphasized his emotional experience, the awe, the sense of being part of something vast, and the uncanny calm that allowed him to remain aware despite the extraordinary nature of the encounter. Both men reported a temporary loss of time perception, a phenomenon noted in many abduction cases where witnesses describe moments stretching or compressing unnaturally. Yet, Despite the strangeness, the details they recalled were remarkably consistent, suggesting that their experiences were both profound and grounded in conscious observation rather than pure imagination. Theoretical interpretations of the encounter abound, and it is worth considering several perspectives while maintaining a calm and reflective tone. Skeptics have proposed explanations ranging from sleep paralysis to environmental misperceptions, suggesting that the men's familiarity with the river and the night environment may have influenced their perceptions. Yet, researchers also point to the specificity of their observations, the precise descriptions of the beings, the continuity of their narrative, and the physiological reactions reported, as evidence that something genuinely extraordinary occurred. Some ufologists argue that Pascagoula represents a rare example of an abduction where the witnesses were consciously aware and capable of detailed recollection, contrasting with more common reports of partial memory or regression through hypnosis. In all interpretations, what stands out is the unusual combination of calm, detailed observation and the profound strangeness of the event itself. The psychological dimension is equally compelling. Trauma experts note that the human mind often seeks to integrate unusual experiences into coherent narratives, which is exactly what Hickson and Parker did, recounting events with precision and consistency over time. Their calm demeanor during and after the encounter suggests that the experience, while extraordinary, was filtered through a lens of practical perception and emotional regulation. Some researchers propose that encounters like this may serve as liminal experiences, moments that temporarily shift consciousness, expand awareness, and challenge perceptions without causing lasting harm. In the gentle stillness of the Pascagoula River, the extraordinary became approachable, observed with care, curiosity, and even a sense of quiet wonder. As the encounter concluded, Hickson and Parker found themselves gently returned to the familiar world of the riverbank. The beings receded, the lights dimmed, and the night resumed its ordinary rhythm. Yet, the memory of what had occurred lingered, vivid and indelible, like a reflection on the water that refuses to fade. They had glimpsed something beyond everyday understanding, an event that combined the surreal and the tangible, leaving them profoundly altered yet calm enough to convey their experience credibly. This delicate balance between awe, observation, and serenity defines the Pascagoula abduction, setting it apart in the history of UFO encounters. In this moment, the story's central mystery is fully realized. A gentle, non-violent abduction, witnessed by ordinary men, set against the quiet beauty of the Pascagoula River. It is a reminder that extraordinary events can unfold in the most familiar settings, that reality can stretch and shimmer without alarm, and that the unknown often arrives with subtlety, observation, and quiet wonder. As the night continues and the river carries the memory of this encounter downstream, the story leaves us with a sense of calm curiosity, inviting reflection on the extraordinary within the ordinary, and preparing us for the days, months, and decades that would follow as this mystery began to ripple through the town, the media, and the world beyond. The moments after the encounter along the Pascagoula River were quiet yet charged with a delicate tension. Hickson and Parker returned to the familiar sensation of solid ground beneath their feet, tried to reconcile what had just unfolded. The river continued to flow as if nothing had changed, reflecting the pale moonlight in gentle ripples, and yet everything in the lives of the two men felt altered. They spoke little at first, each trying to process the experience internally, their minds replaying every detail, the shimmering forms, the humming sounds, the subtle sense of weightlessness, and the almost gentle attention of the beings. There was no immediate fear of harm, only a quiet awe mixed with disbelief, a need to integrate an experience that seemed to straddle the line between the ordinary and the impossible. When the men finally sought help, they approached the nearest authorities with careful clarity. Hickson first reported the event to local police officers, speaking calmly and precisely, recounting the movements of the creatures, the sensations he had felt, and the extraordinary gentleness of the encounter. Parker, still processing his own perceptions, corroborated Hickson's observations with a youthful sincerity that lent their story a striking credibility. The initial responses from law enforcement reflected a mix of skepticism and professional interest, a balance often seen in small towns where extraordinary claims are met with cautious inquiry rather than immediate dismissal. The officers documented the incident with care, noting both the men's composure and the unusual details of their report, setting the stage for the story's broader dissemination. Local reactions followed a similar pattern of cautious curiosity. Neighbors and friends expressed concern, wonder, and occasional disbelief, yet there was no mockery, no derision. Pascagoula in the 1970s was a community that valued practicality, but it was also a place where folklore and the unexplained held subtle sway. Stories of strange lights over the river or unusual events in the nearby marshes had been quietly shared for decades, and the townspeople approached Hickson and Parker's account with a mixture of openness and skepticism. Conversations in kitchens and along front porches reflected genuine curiosity, with neighbors debating the plausibility of what had occurred while maintaining a respect for the men's honesty. This measured reception contributed to the story's credibility, emphasizing that these were ordinary individuals who had simply encountered something extraordinary. The media quickly became involved, drawn by the unusual and compelling nature of the story. Local newspapers, always attentive to community interest, reported on the event with careful phrasing, noting that two men had described an encounter with unusual creatures along the river, while also emphasizing that investigations were underway. Television crews arrived in town to capture interviews, and the story began to ripple beyond the immediate community, reaching regional and eventually national audiences. The media framing was cautious, blending intrigue with skepticism, which helped the tale gain attention without descending into sensationalism. Articles highlighted the calm, deliberate demeanor of the witnesses, and journalists often noted the consistency of their descriptions, reinforcing the notion that this was not a fanciful exaggeration but a carefully observed and sincerely reported experience. Historical context helps explain the rapid media interest. By the early 1970s, the United States was already immersed in a cultural fascination with UFOs and unexplained phenomena. Project Blue Book had concluded its investigations a few years earlier, leaving behind a public eager for credible reports and still hungry for mysteries that could not easily be explained. Television shows and magazines regularly explored the unusual, blending science, speculation, and storytelling, which primed the public for narratives like the Pascagoula Abduction. Hickson and Parker's account fit neatly into this cultural moment. It was detailed, consistent, and remarkably gentle, contrasting with the more frightening or violent reports that often dominated the news. The combination of credibility, locality, and timing ensured that the story would capture attention and remain in public consciousness for decades. The immediate aftermath also included personal reflection and psychological processing. Both Hickson and Parker experienced lingering sensations from the encounter, moments of vivid recall, strange dreams, and an acute awareness of the night sky. Hickson described a lingering feeling of calm curiosity, a sense that he had glimpsed a world larger than his own understanding but had been gently invited to observe it rather than threatened by it. Parker, younger and more impressionable, initially struggled to reconcile disbelief with the vivid clarity of his experience. Researchers who later studied abduction cases note that such reflections are common. Witnesses often report ongoing cognitive processing, attempts to contextualize the experience, and a heightened sensitivity to ordinary phenomena that might carry traces of the extraordinary. In this sense, the immediate aftermath extended beyond the riverbank, shaping the witness's inner world as much as the external events. The narrative of the Pascagoula encounter also reveals subtle social dynamics. Townspeople, while curious, largely respected the integrity of the witnesses, and law enforcement officers documented the story without derision. This measured reception contrasts with cases in other regions where ridicule or skepticism overshadowed witness credibility. In Pascagoula, The combination of ordinary men, a serene setting, and detailed observation created a foundation for a narrative that could be investigated seriously. The calm, attentive approach of both the witnesses and the local community allowed the story to retain a sense of realism, ensuring that the extraordinary elements were never sensationalized at the expense of credibility. As the evening faded fully into night and the river carried on with its timeless flow, the story of Hickson and Parker's experience began to extend beyond the immediate locale. Media coverage and community interest set the stage for formal investigations, while the psychological and emotional ripples of the encounter continued to unfold for the witnesses themselves. The ordinary world had returned in some ways, the familiar rustle of leaves, the soft murmur of the river, but something within Hickson and Parker had shifted, a subtle awareness that life could intersect with the unknown in ways both gentle and unforgettable. In this way, the immediate aftermath of the Pascagoula encounter combined calm reflection, careful observation, and widespread curiosity. The river remained serene, the town quietly attentive, and the men prepared to recount their experiences in precise detail. This period of calm attention and measured response set the stage for deeper investigation, broader media scrutiny, and the emergence of alternative theories, ensuring that the story would persist in the cultural imagination as both a mystery and a gentle, awe-inspiring encounter with the unknown. Following the immediate aftermath of the Pascagoula encounter, attention naturally shifted to the formal investigation and documentation of the event. Local authorities, having received first-hand accounts from Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, carefully recorded the details, noting the men's composure, the clarity of their observations, and the unusual nature of the reported phenomena. While law enforcement officers remained cautious in their conclusions, their reports became the first layer of official documentation, laying the groundwork for further scrutiny. In small towns like Pascagoula, police reports carried weight, reflecting both the credibility of witnesses and the seriousness with which extraordinary claims could be treated in a community context. Soon after, the story began to attract wider attention, drawing the interest of state and federal agencies. The FBI, which maintained a broader mandate for unusual incidents during that period, opened a preliminary investigation. Their involvement was measured and methodical, focusing on verifying details and assessing whether any threat existed to the men or the public. Declassified documents reveal that agents interviewed both Hickson and Parker multiple times, recording extensive notes on their observations and the sequence of events. The witnesses' calm and consistent narratives impressed investigators, who acknowledged that while the experience was extraordinary, there was no evidence of fabrication or intentional deception. This formal attention lent an additional layer of credibility to the case, setting it apart from countless anecdotal reports of UFO sightings that often remained unexamined. Media engagement played an equally significant role in shaping the public perception of the Pascagoula event. Local newspapers reported the incident in a restrained, factual tone, emphasizing the unusual details while noting that investigations were underway. National outlets soon picked up the story, drawn to the combination of ordinary witnesses, extraordinary claims, and the serene Mississippi setting. Television crews conducted interviews, capturing the men's reflections on camera and documenting the calm, precise way they recounted their experience. Unlike sensationalized stories that often dominated headlines, the Pascagoula narrative was framed with balance, highlighting the credibility of the witnesses while leaving space for viewers to wonder without alarm. This careful media presentation allowed audiences to engage with the mystery thoughtfully, enhancing both curiosity and trust in the account. The broader historical context of the 1970s helps explain why the story resonated so strongly with the public. By 1973, the United States had experienced a surge of UFO interest, partly fueled by decades of military and civilian sightings, including the well-known investigations of Project Blue Book. Although Project Blue Book had officially concluded its active study of UFOs, reports continued to surface, and the public remained intrigued by the possibility of extraterrestrial visitation. Hickson and Parker's account arrived at a moment when cultural fascination with the unknown was high, providing a story that was detailed, credible, and imbued with a calm, contemplative tone that distinguished it from more sensational or frightening reports. It fit neatly into the larger societal narrative of exploration, curiosity, and the human desire to encounter what lies beyond the ordinary. The official documentation of the event further reflects the era's methodical approach to unusual claims. FBI memos indicate that investigators cross-checked witness statements with environmental conditions, including moon phases, river flow, and local traffic, to rule out conventional explanations. Both Hickson and Parker underwent interviews with psychologists and local officials, and their accounts were analyzed for consistency. Remarkably, the narratives aligned in both detail and timing, reinforcing the impression that the witnesses were recounting a shared, extraordinary experience rather than separate misunderstandings. These assessments, conducted within a professional and systematic framework, strengthened the legitimacy of the case and contributed to its enduring fascination within the UFO research community. Media coverage also examined the tension between skepticism and belief. Newspapers and television reports frequently included expert opinions ranging from scientists to local scholars, discussing the plausibility of extraterrestrial involvement while acknowledging alternative explanations. Some skeptics proposed misinterpretations of lights, atmospheric phenomena, or mechanical craft, while ufologists and researchers emphasized the alignment of witness testimony with broader patterns observed in other abduction cases. This balanced reporting allowed the public to engage with the story thoughtfully, rather than being swept into panic or blind credulity. For listeners of tonight's story, it is important to note that the cultural lens of the 1970s, an era of scientific optimism, space exploration, and curiosity about the unknown, shaped both the investigation and the reception of the Pascagoula incident. Another layer of credibility arose from the careful documentation of physical and behavioral observations. Investigators noted that both men described unusual tactile sensations, including a sense of weightlessness and subtle environmental shifts, as well as auditory perceptions like humming or soft vibrations. These reports were cross-referenced with environmental conditions and historical accounts of similar phenomena, offering a structured, credible context for the unusual claims. The calm and deliberate manner in which Hickson and Parker described these sensations, without exaggeration or dramatization, stood in contrast to many sensationalized reports circulating at the time. Researchers later highlighted this measured narrative style as one of the factors that makes the Pascagoula case particularly compelling, emphasizing that ordinary individuals had been confronted with something extraordinary yet maintained composure, clarity, and credibility. Finally, the combination of government and media attention helped cement the Pascagoula encounter in both local and national memory. The story's persistence owes much to the careful documentation, the public's fascination with unexplained phenomena, and the calm, detailed narratives of the witnesses themselves. Unlike fleeting or ambiguous reports that fade with time, the Pascagoula case became a subject of ongoing discussion, study, and reflection. It served as a bridge between local folklore and broader UFO culture, illustrating how credible witness testimony, methodical investigation, and thoughtful media coverage can combine to create a narrative that remains both intriguing and respectful of the witnesses' experiences. In this way, government and media involvement did not sensationalize the story but rather framed it thoughtfully, allowing the Pascagoula encounter to be studied, discussed, and reflected upon for decades to come. The measured attention of law enforcement, the systematic documentation by federal agencies, and the restrained yet thorough reporting by media outlets all contributed to a narrative that balanced curiosity with credibility. The calm and contemplative approach set the stage for the next layers of exploration, the alternative and paranormal theories that would later arise, as researchers and enthusiasts attempted to understand the encounter within broader patterns of human experience, culture, and unexplained phenomena. As the Pascagoula River incident drew wider attention, A variety of alternative interpretations and paranormal perspectives began to emerge, inviting listeners to consider the event from multiple angles without diminishing the calm, reflective tone of the story. Some of the earliest explanations were rooted in skepticism, grounded in natural phenomena or psychological processes. Skeptics suggested that the glowing lights and unusual forms observed by Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker might have been reflections of distant boats, atmospheric distortions, or even misidentified wildlife moving through the riverbank reeds. Others proposed that the men, influenced by the cultural fascination with UFOs in the 1970s, may have unconsciously interpreted ordinary occurrences as extraordinary. While these explanations offered a rational perspective, they could not entirely account for the vivid consistency, timing, and tactile sensations described by the witnesses, leaving a subtle sense of wonder intact. Paranormal researchers, on the other hand, embraced the story as a compelling example of an extraterrestrial encounter. Unlike many reports of violent or frightening abductions, the Pascagoula incident was remarkable for its gentleness, which suggested a deliberate and non-threatening interaction. Some theorists proposed that the beings were conducting careful observation, guided by motives unknown to humans, yet displaying a restraint and subtle awareness that set the encounter apart from more aggressive accounts. Hypnotherapy sessions conducted in later years with some abduction witnesses across the United States revealed recurring patterns: a sense of being lifted or moved, auditory phenomena like humming, and a strong awareness of the environment despite extraordinary circumstances. Hickson and Parker's experience, which was consciously observed in real time rather than recalled under regression, offered a rare and credible lens through which researchers could study these phenomena. Psychological interpretations also provided insight into the experience, emphasizing the complex interplay between perception, cognition, and memory during highly unusual events. Experts in cognitive psychology suggest that moments of heightened attention, particularly in low-light or isolated environments, can intensify sensory perception, making ordinary stimuli appear extraordinary. For example, subtle reflections on water, shadows among the trees, or the rustle of reeds could be amplified in awareness and interpreted as deliberate movement. However, even when considering these psychological factors, the Pascagoula case remained distinctive. Both Hickson and Parker described sensations of weightlessness, tactile awareness, and auditory humming that were difficult to attribute solely to environmental cues, suggesting that their experience existed at a liminal intersection of perception and the unknown. Another layer of alternative explanation considered social and cultural influences. In the 1970s, UFO culture had permeated American consciousness, from television shows depicting alien contact to news reports of unexplained lights and government investigations. These cultural artifacts did not implant false memories, but they shaped the narrative frameworks through which witnesses might interpret unfamiliar stimuli. Hickson and Parker were ordinary men, deeply grounded in daily routines and community life, yet they were also products of their time, aware of stories of extraterrestrial life and curious about the unknown. Researchers often note that abduction narratives frequently reflect a blend of universal human perception and specific cultural motifs, where the unfamiliar is interpreted through the lens of what is collectively imaginable. The Pascagoula encounter, while fitting certain patterns, remained unique in its calm and detailed observational quality. Beyond psychological and cultural theories, some researchers explored the possibility that the event could represent a genuine anomalous phenomenon that defied conventional explanation. The consistency of witness accounts, the physiological effects reported, and the careful documentation by law enforcement and federal agencies lent weight to this perspective. In some studies of abduction cases, events like the Pascagoula encounter are categorized as conscious abductions, moments where individuals retain awareness and can observe extraordinary phenomena without the usual amnesia reported in other encounters. Hickson and Parker's narrative aligns with this pattern, offering a rare opportunity to examine such an experience through first-hand testimony rather than retrospective memory alone. The paranormal perspective also invites reflection on the gentle and deliberate nature of the encounter. Unlike reports of invasive or frightening abductions, the Pascagoula case featured beings that appeared to observe without aggression, moving with a rhythm that was almost purposeful and measured. Researchers have noted that such encounters often evoke a sense of awe and wonder rather than panic, a state that may allow witnesses to recall fine details with clarity. Hickson and Parker's experience reflects this phenomenon, highlighting the possibility that some interactions with the unknown are not intended to harm but to offer observation, communication, or perhaps subtle guidance. In this sense, the encounter becomes both a mystery and a meditation, an extraordinary moment framed within the calm of a Mississippi River night. Folklore and regional narratives add yet another dimension to the story. Stories of strange lights over rivers, mysterious beings in isolated swamplands, and unexplained occurrences along waterways have circulated in southern communities for generations. These accounts often share common motifs: an emphasis on observation rather than harm, encounters at night near reflective water surfaces, and a combination of awe and subtle fear. While these regional legends cannot verify the Pascagoula event, they suggest that the area itself has long been a stage for experiences that stretch ordinary perception. By situating Hickson and Parker's account within this broader folkloric context, listeners can appreciate the story as part of a continuum of human curiosity and wonder, where the ordinary world occasionally reveals glimpses of the extraordinary. The cultural and psychological interpretations of the Pascagoula encounter converge to form a rich tapestry of understanding. Skeptics, psychologists, ufologists, and folklorists all provide different lenses through which to consider the event, yet none can fully capture its essence. This multiplicity of perspectives encourages thoughtful reflection, allowing listeners to explore the possibilities without feeling rushed toward conclusion or certainty. The encounter exemplifies the interplay between human perception, environmental cues, cultural frameworks, and potentially anomalous phenomena, creating a narrative that is both grounded and mysterious. Finally, contemplating alternative theories emphasizes the enduring allure of the Pascagoula incident. It reminds us that some experiences resist simple explanation, that extraordinary events can occur within ordinary lives, and that the calm observation of the unknown can be as profound as the encounter itself. Hickson and Parker's story invites a gentle curiosity, encouraging listeners to consider not only what was observed but how human beings respond to mystery, wonder, and the gentle intrusion of the unexplainable into familiar landscapes. In this sense, the alternative perspectives do not diminish the story, they enrich it, offering layers of understanding that make the narrative both compelling and soothing, perfectly suited to a reflective bedtime journey. As the night deepens and your breathing slows into a gentle, rhythmic cadence, let us turn our attention to modern investigations, efforts to observe, document, and understand these quiet mysteries using the tools and technology of our time. While historical accounts, folklore, and eyewitness testimonies provide rich context, contemporary research adds a layer of methodical observation, capturing phenomena with instruments and approaches unavailable to earlier generations. Yet even with advanced technology, the night continues to hold its secrets, offering glimpses of the unexplained in ways that are as serene as they are captivating. The quiet anticipation of observing, recording, and reflecting on these occurrences encourages the mind to remain attentive without alarm, perfectly suited to a journey toward rest and contemplation. In recent decades, researchers have employed an array of instruments to monitor isolated locations: infrared cameras, motion sensors, radar systems, and multispectral imaging. These tools are often deployed at ranches, deserts, abandoned airfields, and dense forests, the very landscapes where strange lights and shadowy figures have been reported for decades. Some investigations focus on capturing unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, while others explore subtle terrestrial anomalies, unexplained sounds, fleeting movements, or changes in electromagnetic readings. Unlike the hurried excitement often depicted in media, Field researchers describe these observations with patience and calm precision, waiting quietly for moments when the night itself reveals something unusual. The act of watching becomes meditative, an exercise in gentle attention, echoing the reflective rhythm we encourage in tonight's storytelling. Notable sites such as Skinwalker Ranch have been central to ongoing investigation. Here, teams of scientists, engineers, and independent researchers have observed phenomena over extended periods, documenting unusual lights, electromagnetic anomalies, and reports of shadow-like figures. Sophisticated equipment captures fleeting glimpses of lights that appear and vanish without discernible source, while sensors record unexplained energy fluctuations. Researchers often describe a sense of quiet anticipation. The night feels alive, attentive, and patient, offering subtle signs rather than dramatic displays. For listeners, imagining these carefully orchestrated observations creates a sense of shared experience, one that is calm, reflective, and richly layered with the mystery of the unseen. UAPs have also been observed near military training areas, often by highly trained personnel. Pilots, radar operators, and other professionals have recorded objects moving with unusual precision, accelerating rapidly, and hovering silently. Many of these encounters have been corroborated with instruments, adding credibility to descriptions that might otherwise be dismissed. Official programs, such as the Pentagon's UAP Task Force, continue to study these incidents with a focus on safety, data analysis, and pattern recognition. Even in these highly controlled investigations, much remains unresolved, highlighting the persistent mystery of the night skies. For the listener, this continuity between historical accounts, modern observation, and official documentation creates a gentle bridge from curiosity to reflection, sustaining calm engagement without fear or urgency. Modern investigations also emphasize environmental and scientific measurement. Researchers carefully record weather conditions, light pollution, atmospheric anomalies, and other natural variables, striving to differentiate ordinary phenomena from the unexplained. In many cases, these measurements validate known explanations: planets, satellites, distant aircraft, or rare meteorological effects. Yet a remarkable number of observations resist conventional interpretation, exhibiting behavior that is deliberate, intelligent, or inconsistent with known natural laws. These moments of subtle anomaly, lights that pause and pivot, shadow-like forms that appear and dissolve, energy fluctuations without discernible source, sustain the gentle tension between comprehension and wonder, inviting the mind to observe with calm attentiveness. Technology has also enhanced documentation for civilian witnesses and amateur investigators. High-resolution cameras, night vision devices, and infrared sensors allow individuals to capture phenomena that were once fleeting or imperceptible. These recordings, often shared through online platforms, provide a quiet community of observation where patterns can be compared and studied without sensationalism. Even without dramatic effects or loud surprises, these moments of capture, subtle glows moving across an empty field, shadows drifting through a forest clearing, or transient lights above abandoned structures, offer a meditative rhythm. For the listener, these modern accounts reinforce the idea that the night is both watchful and gentle, full of moments to notice and contemplate rather than to fear. Collaboration between technology, careful observation, and historical context is particularly compelling. Researchers often cross-reference contemporary sightings with archival accounts, finding remarkable similarities in patterns of movement, timing, and environmental context. Some lights recur seasonally or in specific geographic patterns, shadowy forms appear consistently in certain wooded regions, and anomalies at desert ranches echo decades of prior observations. This layering of data, historical record, and modern technology enhances both credibility and intrigue. It invites listeners to imagine a patient, watchful night, one that offers gentle mysteries, deliberate glimpses, and subtle signs, all framed by the careful attention of observers who move slowly and notice deeply. Psychological research complements these investigations, examining how human perception interacts with the environment and instrumentation. Isolated locations, low light conditions, and attentive observation create heightened sensitivity to subtle movement, sound, and light. Even when phenomena can be explained by natural causes, the experience of witnessing them remains immersive and meditative. Yet, despite decades of scrutiny, the encounter retains its essential mystery. It resists full explanation, encouraging listeners to consider the unknown without demanding belief or certainty. This cultural legacy, the blending of grounded observation, calm narration, and enduring mystery, is what makes the Pascagoula abduction not just a story of one night along a Mississippi River, but a quiet, reflective touchstone for human curiosity and wonder. As the moonlight continues to shimmer over the river and the gentle flow of water carries memories downstream, the story of Pascagoula reminds us that extraordinary events can occur within ordinary life. It teaches us that curiosity, calm observation, and open awareness are often the best guides when facing the unknown. The encounter has become more than a local tale. It has become a cultural symbol, a narrative that encourages us to look beyond the obvious, to notice the subtle, and to embrace mystery without fear. It is a story that persists in memory, in media, and in imagination, inviting each listener to experience the gentle touch of the extraordinary in their own reflection and dreams. Decades after the Pascagoula encounter, modern investigations have revisited the event with refined tools and analytical rigor. Researchers have examined eyewitness testimonies, environmental conditions, and historical records, highlighting the remarkable consistency of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker's accounts. The details, the pear-shaped bodies, metallic texture, clawed appendages, and subtle humming, remain strikingly stable across decades of interviews, suggesting that these memories are not mere fabrications or distortions. Unlike many abduction reports relying on regression, Pascagoula is notable for conscious observation, allowing the men to retain vivid, real-time awareness of the encounter. Environmental analysis of the river and surrounding area shows conditions that could slightly amplify perception, moonlight reflecting on the water, fog, and dense reeds. But these factors cannot fully explain the precise tactile sensations, weightless feeling, or deliberate movement of the beings. Technological tools like satellite imagery, atmospheric modeling, and light reflection studies have helped investigators simulate conditions, yet the encounter resists conventional explanation. Psychological and physiological research adds depth. Witnesses reported heightened awareness, subtle vibrations, and a gentle sense of being lifted, phenomena documented in other abduction studies. Comparative analyses of other cases reveal recurring motifs, yet Pascagoula stands out for its serene and conscious observation. Modern research emphasizes reflection over resolution, treating the story as a window into human perception and consciousness. Even today, the case remains a unique study of how ordinary individuals can experience extraordinary phenomena calmly, providing a bridge between scientific inquiry, cultural interest, and contemplative wonder. As the story concludes, the Pascagoula encounter offers a gentle space for reflection. Unlike accounts of terror or chaos, this story emphasizes calm observation, curiosity, and all within ordinary life. The quiet riverbank, moonlight shimmering on water, and soft rustling of reeds created a serene stage for an extraordinary event, showing how subtlety and attentiveness can reveal mystery without fear. Hickson and Parker's composure exemplifies the human ability to witness the unknown with clarity, retaining both sensory detail and emotional balance. Philosophically, the encounter reminds us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved but observed. It illustrates the delicate boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary, and how perception, mindfulness, and openness can reveal wonders that exist quietly alongside daily life. Culturally, the Pascagoula story continues to inspire reflection, media retellings, and contemplative storytelling, demonstrating that mystery can coexist with credibility and calm. Spiritually and metaphorically, The narrative invites meditation. The men briefly crossed a threshold into the unknown, encountering beings with gentle intent and returned with insights that lingered in memory. The story encourages embracing curiosity without fear, noticing subtle phenomena, and allowing wonder to coexist with serenity. As listeners imagine the calm river, the soft glow of unexplainable lights, and the gentle hum of the unknown, the story becomes a sleepful meditation, a narrative that soothes, inspires reflection, and invites dreams filled with quiet awe.